They scored 8 Billboard Top 40 hits. They played at the White House. They were the smoothest, most radio-friendly band to ever come out of the American South. And yet most people today couldn't name all 6 members. What happened after the hits dried up is far more dramatic, far more heartbreaking, and far more unexpected than anyone imagined. And one of these stories ends in a way no one ever saw coming. This is Atlanta Rhythm Section, Then versus Now, 2026. The year was 1970, Doraville, Georgia. And this band wasn't born in a garage. It was born inside a professional recording studio called Studio One, assembled by producer Buddy Bowie. These weren't fresh-faced kids chasing a dream. Founding members Rodney Justo, Barry Bailey, Paul Goddard, Dean Daughtry, Robert Nix, and Jr. Cobb had already paid their dues in bands like the Candymen and Classics 4. They were professionals, session musicians, men who knew the difference between a good performance and a great one. Their sound was different from day one. While the rest of Southern rock was cranking distortion and stretching solos into the stratosphere, ARS went the other way. Smooth melodies, tight harmonies, production built for radio. They signed to Decca Records, backed other artists, and quietly built something that was about to become enormous. But that's not the full story. Number 6, we start where everything began, the original voice of Atlanta Rhythm Section. Justo was a founding member who sang lead on the debut album in 1972. He was the first sound the world ever heard from this band, but the album had limited commercial success, and Justo departed shortly after. Quietly, without drama, the kind of exit that only looks significant in hindsight, the band brought in a new singer. The world moved on. What many people don't know is that Justo never fully left music. He kept performing, kept his connection to the craft alive. And here's the full circle moment. In 2026, Rodney Justo is back, leading Atlanta Rhythm Section as their frontman. The first voice is now the current voice. Decades later, the founding vocalist has returned to front the band he helped create. If that isn't a story worth telling, nothing is. Number 5. If Justo was the beginning, Ronnie Hammond was the sound that made the world stop and listen. When Hammond stepped in after Justo's departure, something clicked that nobody could have scripted. His voice, while warm, rich, perfectly suited to the ARS style, became the defining sound of the band's entire peak era. So Into You, top 10 in 1977, that's Hammond. Imaginary Lover, top 10 in 1978, that's Hammond. Spooky, Champagne Jam, I'm Not Gonna Let It Bother Me Tonight. Every single hit, every arena performance, every radio moment that made this band famous. That was Ronnie Hammond's voice carrying it. But behind the scenes, a very different story was unfolding. By 1983, the landscape had shifted. New wave dominated. The FM rock era was fading, and Hammond found himself stepping away from the band he had defined. Life after the spotlight proved difficult. He continued performing when he could, but the commercial heights were behind him. Ronnie Hammond passed away in 2011, gone far too soon, but his voice never went anywhere. Every time So Into You comes on the radio, Ronnie Hammond is right there, singing. The golden era of Atlanta Rhythm Section had a golden voice, and that voice belongs to him forever. Number 4. Every legendary band has that one guitarist whose playing defines everything. For ARS, that was Barry Bailey. Melodic without being flashy, precise without being cold. Bailey understood that in this band, the guitar served the song, never competed with it. That discipline made him one of the most respected players in Southern rock. Where Leonard Skynyrd was thunder, Bailey was lightning, precise, bright, purposeful. He gave ARS its melodic edge, the quality that made their rock songs feel built for radio without ever sacrificing soul. As the hits stopped coming and the band transitioned into a legacy act, Bailey stayed connected to the music. A Southern rock guitarist through and through, a man who couldn't imagine life without a guitar in his hands. Barry Bailey passed away in 2022, another irreplaceable piece of ARS history gone. His guitar work built the house that Atlanta Rhythm Section lived in. Every note he recorded still stands. Number 3. In every great band, there is someone whose contribution is felt more than it is seen. Someone whose absence would bring the whole structure down without anyone knowing exactly why. For ARS, that was Paul Goddard. As bassist, Goddard was the foundation of everything. Every groove, every locked-in rhythm, every moment where six musicians felt like one unified thing, that was his doing. A founding member from Studio One, 1970. He was there for all 8 top 40 hits, every recording session, every tour. And he had seen more of the full journey than almost anyone. And this is where things got quiet. And quiet is sometimes harder than loud. Paul Goddard passed away in 2014, and with his passing, 3 founding members were gone within just a few years of each other. Nix in 2012, Goddard in 2014. The core of the original band was disappearing, one loss at a time, the unsung foundation, appreciated most, as foundations always are, once it was gone. Number 2, and this one might surprise you. When people talk about ARS hits, they talk about the vocals and the grooves. But behind all of it was a songwriter creating the architecture of every hit from inside the band. J.R. Cobb. He came from Classics 4, a band that had already charted before ARS existed. He understood song structure the way a carpenter understands wood. That knowledge went into everything ARS recorded. So Into You worked because of the songwriting foundation Cobb helped build. Champagne Jam succeeded because the writing held it together. Imaginary Lover followed because a band with this kind of songwriting backbone could keep delivering, album after album. 8 top 40 hits don't happen by accident. Somebody in the room has to know how to build a song. Cobb was that person. But then everything changed. The 1980s shift hit hard. The window ARS had found, that perfect intersection of Southern grit and pop accessibility, was closing. Cobb navigated the transition from hitmaker to legacy artist, staying connected to music in the years that followed. That kind of talent doesn't disappear because the charts move on. J.R. Cobb passed away in 2019, another chapter permanently closed. But the songs he helped write are still out there, still playing, still finding new listeners who feel exactly what audiences felt in 1977 when they first came on the radio. Number 1. We saved this for last, because this is the story that puts everything into its full, undeniable weight. Dean Daughtry, keyboardist, founding member. The atmospheric textures of Imaginary Lover. That's Daughtry. The melodic depth of So Into You. That's Daughtry. The musical glue that held the ARS sound together across more than a decade. That was him, playing keyboards like the whole thing depended on it. Because it did. He was there from 1970, through Decca, through Polydor, through Dorival cracking the charts at number 35 in 1974, through the explosion of the late 70s, through the decline, through every reunion and nostalgia tour. Daughtry was always there, and this is where things took a final, heartbreaking turn. After Hammond passed in 2011, after Nix in 2012, after Goddard in 2014, after Cobb in 2019, after Bailey in 2022, Dean Daughtry was the last surviving member of the classic lineup, the final living link to the original 6, the last man who could say, I was there from the very beginning. Dean Daughtry passed away in 2023. With that, every member of the classic lineup was gone. The 6 musicians who created 8 top 40 hits, who played for a president, who built something extraordinary out of a recording studio in Georgia. Every single one of them gone. 6 founding members. 12 years, one by one. What many people don't realize is how quietly this happened. No massive mourning, no wall-to-wall coverage. Just a generation of music slowly stepping off the stage. The early 1980s hit ARS the way they hit every classic rock band. Hard and without warning. New wave was in. Synthesizers dominated. Hammond departed in 1983. Lineup changes became frequent. A mid-decade hiatus followed. They came back in 1989 with Truth in a Structured Form. Not a chart hit, but a statement. We are still here. They became a touring act through the 90s and beyond. Playing the hits, maintaining their loyal Southern fan base, keeping the songs alive for people who had never forgotten them. And even as the commercial peak receded further into memory, the music never stopped mattering. The catalog kept selling, the songs kept streaming. New listeners kept discovering Imaginary Lover and having the same reaction every generation has had. These are genuinely great songs. These do not age. So where does that leave us? The band is still active, still touring, and leading them. In one of the most quietly poetic full-circle moments in rock history is Rodney Justo, the founding vocalist, the first voice, the man who stepped away before any of the hits were written and who has now returned more than 50 years later to carry the band forward. The current lineup includes Steve Stone, Justin Senker, David Anderson, Roger Steffen, and Lee Sheely. No original member from 1970 remains. The band that exists in 2026 is a legacy act, a continuation rather than the original thing itself. That is not a criticism. That is the honest truth of what happens when a band outlives its founders and chooses to keep going anyway. They perform the classic hits. They tour. The music remains on classic rock radio. The catalog still sells and streams globally. Because music made with real craft, real care, and genuine artistry, that music outlasts everything. What started in 1970 in a recording studio in Doraville, Georgia became something none of them could have predicted. A band that played for presidents, 8 top 40 hits, 12 years of loss, and somehow still here. Some found success beyond any reasonable expectation. Some faced challenges that never made the headlines. Some left legacies so large that time will never fully diminish them. Because in the end, Atlanta Rhythm Section was never just about the hits. It was about what happens when the right people find each other at the right moment and create something that outlasts all of them. The career may have followed a familiar script, but everything those men lived, everything they gave, everything they left behind in those recordings, that was real, all of it, and real things never truly end.